Get ready to dive deep into the fascinating life of one of America's most iconic figures, Benjamin Franklin. You've given us a treasure trove. His autobiography, The Life of Dr. Franklin, as written by himself, addressed to his son, no less. And we're going to unearth the hidden gems and unexpected twists that reveal the man behind the legend.
It's remarkable how much we think we know about Franklin, but his autobiography offers surprisingly personal and revealing insights. We'll explore not just his accomplishments, but the values and experiences that shaped him.
We'll explore his journey from runaway apprentice to scientific pioneer and founding father, but not just the highlights. This deep dive is about understanding what made Franklin tick.
We'll see how his early experiences, even seemingly insignificant ones, had a ripple effect on his later achievements.
So let's start at the beginning. Franklin traces his family back 5 generations, all blacksmiths.
5 generations. It's like blacksmithing was ingrained in their DNA. His grandfather, Thomas, was part of that long line, but his father, Josias, decided to forge his own path, becoming a soap boiler and tallow chandler.
That's a big shift. What exactly is a tallow chandler anyway?
Essentially, someone who makes candles and soap from animal fat. Quite a different trade than blacksmithing. But what's interesting is that even though Josias broke with tradition, there was still a strong emphasis on skilled craftsmanship in the family.
And speaking of skilled craftsmanship, Franklin's uncle Benjamin also made a name for himself. He was a silk dyer, but also a bit of a Renaissance man, dabbling in poetry, inventing shorthand, and actively engaging in politics.
It makes you wonder if those interests rubbed off on young Ben. You can see parallels in their curiosity and desire to improve themselves.
Right, it's like that entrepreneurial, inventive spirit was already in the family. Speaking of Ben's father, Josias initially wanted him to join the clergy. But with a large family to support, practicalities won over aspirations.
That decision set Franklin on a different trajectory, one that would lead him to a printing apprenticeship with his brother James. But even though formal religious studies were off the table, Franklin never lost his thirst for knowledge.
Absolutely. He was a voracious reader, even with limited access to books. There's that great story about him befriending a wealthy tradesman just to borrow his books.
That resourcefulness is a recurring theme in Franklin's life. He understood the value of knowledge and was willing to go the extra mile to acquire it.
He also had a knack for self-improvement. Remember his early attempts at poetry? Apparently his brother James wasn't impressed, bluntly stating that versifiers were always poor.
Ouch, that's a tough critique, especially from your own brother. But maybe it was the reality check Franklin needed. He shifted his focus to prose, a skill that proved invaluable in his later success.
He even used The Spectator, a popular magazine at the time, as a tool for honing his writing skills. He would dissect the articles, try to recreate them from memory, and compare his version to the original.
It's not just about improving his writing, though. It reveals a deeper commitment to continuous learning and self-improvement. He was constantly analyzing, refining, and striving for excellence.
And that dedication carried over into his work at his brother's printing press. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though, was it?
Not at all. Their relationship was fraught with tension and power struggles. James was older, and in that era, apprenticeships were strict. Plus, James landed in jail for publishing content critical of the government.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire. But amidst all this drama, Franklin was secretly contributing articles to his brother's newspaper, the New England Courant, and even receiving anonymous praise for his writing.
Imagine getting recognition for your work without anyone knowing it was you. It must have been incredibly satisfying, especially considering the strained relationship with his brother. It speaks to Franklin's talent and his growing confidence as a writer.
But eventually, the tension boiled over, leading to Franklin's daring escape from his apprenticeship. He secretly boarded a ship and sailed to Philadelphia at the age of 17. That's a bold move for anyone, let alone a teenager in the 18th century.
It speaks volumes about his ambition, his willingness to take risks, and his independent spirit. And remember, this was long before instant communication or easy travel. He was truly stepping into the unknown.
His arrival in Philadelphia wasn't exactly glamorous, though, was it?
Yeah.
He describes wandering the streets, hungry, with pockets stuffed with clothes, and no one to turn to. He even bought 3 giant rolls because he didn't know how to order bread in the city, ending up eating one while walking down the street.
It's a great image that humanizes this larger-than-life figure. Here's this future founding father feeling lost and hungry in a new city, just trying to figure things out. It reminds us that even the most accomplished individuals start somewhere, and those early experiences often shape their paths.
He eventually found work with another printer, Samuel Keimer, who, according to Franklin, was a less than ideal employer.
Keimer was described as disgustingly unclean and a little knavish by Franklin, not exactly a glowing review. But even in this less-than-ideal situation, Franklin's ambition was already shining through. Remember Governor Keith, who was impressed by Franklin back in Boston? Well, he resurfaces in Philadelphia and takes young Franklin under his wing.
It seems like everyone saw Franklin's potential, even if they weren't always the best mentors. Keith encouraged Franklin to start his own printing business, even promising to secure financial backing from Franklin's father.
So Franklin set sail back to Boston, full of hope and excitement, to pitch this grand plan to his father. But his father, ever the pragmatist, wasn't convinced. He thought Franklin was too young and inexperienced for such a venture.
I guess even brilliant minds need a little parental guidance sometimes.
Exactly. But even though his father refused to provide financial support, he offered valuable advice. He emphasized the importance of hard work, frugality, and building a good reputation. It was a lesson that stayed with Franklin throughout his life.
It's amazing how those early lessons from family can have such a lasting impact. So, Franklin returns to Philadelphia, wiser and more determined. But what about Miss Reed, the young woman he had his eye on before his trip?
Well, that's where things get complicated. Franklin returns to find that Miss Reed, influenced by her mother's doubts about his financial prospects, had married another man. It was a significant setback for Franklin, both emotionally and potentially financially.
Talk about a plot twist. What happened next?
Remember how Franklin had been misled by Governor Keith's promises of financial support? Well, Miss Reed's husband ends up pulling a similar stunt. Rumors surfaced that he already had a wife back in England, making his marriage to Miss Reed invalid.
That's quite a coincidence. So what did Franklin do?
He and Miss Reed rekindled their connection, and despite the societal scandal and potential financial burden from her previous marriage, they decided to get married in 1730. It was a bold move, defying conventions and taking a chance on love, despite the obstacles.
It's a reminder that life doesn't always go according to plan, and sometimes those unexpected twists lead to the greatest rewards. Speaking of rewards, let's talk about one of Franklin's most enduring legacies, the public library.
Absolutely. But before we dive into that, let's take a moment to reflect on Franklin's journey so far. From escaping his apprenticeship to navigating complex relationships and establishing himself in a new city, we're seeing the emergence of the resourceful, ambitious, and self-driven individual who would leave an indelible mark on history.
And when we come back, we'll explore how Franklin, the bookworm, turned into Franklin, the library founder, and how his insatiable curiosity led him to some of his most groundbreaking discoveries. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Before we left off, we were talking about Franklin's love for books and his vision for making knowledge accessible to everyone.
It's incredible to think how his passion for reading as a young boy ultimately led to the establishment of one of America's first public libraries.
He and his friends in the Junto, that club for self-improvement he founded, they initially tried creating a shared library by pooling their books.
It was a noble idea, but it didn't quite work in practice. They faced challenges with organization and keeping track of ownership. It highlighted the need for a more structured and sustainable solution.
And that's where Franklin's ingenuity shines. He saw a problem, and instead of getting discouraged, he engineered a solution.
He drafted a detailed proposal for a public library in Philadelphia, outlining subscription terms and a system for managing the collection.
It was a revolutionary concept at the time, a library open to everyone, not just scholars or the wealthy. It's hard to imagine now, but access to information was a privilege back then.
Exactly. Knowledge was power, and Franklin believed that power should be shared. His vision for the Library Company of Philadelphia was about empowering individuals and fostering a more informed and engaged citizenry.
And the library wasn't just a repository for books, it became a center for intellectual discourse and community building, a testament to Franklin's belief in the power of shared knowledge.
The Library Company of Philadelphia truly became a cornerstone of the city's intellectual and civic life. It's a legacy that continues to inspire us today.
Speaking of inspiration, Franklin was a true polymath, constantly seeking knowledge and exploring different fields. Remember his fascination with swimming. He even developed a method for teaching people to swim.
It's remarkable how his curiosity spans such diverse areas, but it's his work with electricity that truly cemented his place in scientific history. Of course, we can't talk about Franklin and electricity without mentioning the legendary kite experiment.
It's become one of the most iconic images in science. Franklin flying a kite in a thunderstorm to prove that lightning is electrical. Was he really that daring?
He was. It was a risky experiment and, by today's standards, incredibly dangerous. But it was a turning point in our understanding of electricity. Before Franklin's experiment, people didn't understand the connection between lightning and electricity.
So what exactly did Franklin's experiment demonstrate?
Well, think of it like this. Franklin believed that lightning was a giant spark of electricity. To test this, he flew a kite with a metal key attached to the string during a thunderstorm. When lightning struck the kite, the electrical charge traveled down the string and gave him a shock. This showed that lightning was indeed a form of electricity, not some mysterious force of nature as many believed at the
Ah,
time.
that's pretty amazing. He essentially proved that something we see in the sky is the same force that can power our homes. It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
And it wasn't just a theoretical discovery. Franklin's insights led to the invention of the lightning rod, a device that protects buildings from lightning strikes.
A practical solution to a real-world problem. That's what I find so fascinating about Franklin. He wasn't just a brilliant thinker, he was a doer. He took his knowledge and used it to make the world a better, safer place.
Absolutely. He was a scientist, but also an inventor and an engineer. His work wasn't confined to laboratories or academic journals. It had a direct impact on people's lives.
Speaking of impact, let's revisit his time in London. We talked about his early trip, the one where Governor Keith's promises of support turned out to be empty. It was a harsh lesson, but it seems like those experiences fueled his determination even more.
They did. After that setback, Franklin returned to Philadelphia with a renewed focus. He immersed himself in his printing business, continued to learn and grow, and eventually became a prominent figure in the city's social and political circles.
It's interesting how those challenges, those moments where things didn't go as planned, seemed to shape his character and push him towards even greater achievements.
Resilience is a key trait we see throughout Franklin's life. He didn't let setbacks define him. He used them as opportunities to learn, adapt, and come back stronger.
And it wasn't long before he found himself on the political stage. His deep understanding of the colony's needs, combined with his skills in diplomacy and negotiation, made him a natural leader.
His rise was remarkable. From clerk of the Pennsylvania Assembly to agent for the colonies in London, he became the voice of the American colonies, advocating for their interests and pushing back against unfair policies.
That's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
Essentially, he was bridging the gap between the American colonies and the British government.
He was. And it's during this period that we see Franklin's political philosophy taking shape. He argued for greater autonomy for the colonies, opposed unjust taxation, and played a pivotal role in drafting the Albany Plan of Union.
The Albany Plan of Union. Remind me what that was about.
Essentially, it was a proposal for a unified colonial government, a way to strengthen the colonies and increase their bargaining power with Britain. While it wasn't adopted at the time, it laid the groundwork for the ideas that would later fuel the American Revolution.
So he was already planting the seeds for American independence, even before the idea had widespread support.
He was a visionary leader, always thinking ahead, always looking for solutions that would benefit the greater good. And he wasn't afraid to tackle controversial issues. He became president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, advocating for the end of slavery.
And he did it all with his signature wit and humor. Remember the speech of Miss Polly Baker? That satirical piece was brilliant.
It was. Disguised as a courtroom speech, it cleverly exposed the hypocrisy and double standards women faced at the time.
It's amazing how his words continue to resonate centuries later. It's like he had this uncanny ability to tap into universal truths and human experiences that transcend time and place.
Absolutely. But there's another side to Franklin's story, one that's filled with tension and heartbreak. His relationship with his son, William. It's a reminder that even the most accomplished individuals face personal challenges, and sometimes those challenges intersect with the larger events of history.
That's a good point. We often focus on Franklin's achievements, but it's important to remember that he was also a man with complex relationships and personal struggles. And we'll explore that side of his story when we return for the final part of our deep dive into the life of Benjamin Franklin. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Benjamin Franklin.
We've explored his incredible achievements, his scientific discoveries, his political acumen, and his enduring legacy as a founding father.
But as we hinted at before the break, there's a more personal side to Franklin's story, one that's intertwined with the tumultuous events of the American Revolution.
His relationship with his son William is a poignant example of how personal loyalties and family ties can be tested during times of political upheaval.
So let's talk about William. He was Benjamin's illegitimate son, born before his marriage to Deborah Reed. Despite the societal norms of the time, Franklin openly acknowledged William and raised him as his own.
It speaks to Franklin's character. his willingness to defy conventions, and his deep love for his son. He even took William to London with him, securing him a prestigious position as Royal Governor of New Jersey.
Wow. That's a pretty impressive feat. Sounds like Franklin was incredibly proud of his son and wanted to give him every opportunity to succeed.
He was, but then the revolution happened and everything changed.
Yeah. It must have been an incredibly difficult time for both of them. William, loyal to the crown, chose to side with the British, while Franklin became a key figure in the fight for American independence.
Imagine the emotional turmoil. A father and son on opposing sides of a conflict that would determine the fate of a nation. It was a heartbreaking situation, and one that ultimately led to a permanent rift in their relationship.
Did they ever try to reconcile?
There were attempts, but the wounds were too deep. The political divide became an insurmountable personal barrier. William eventually moved to England, and their relationship remained fractured for the rest of their lives.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds and the most loving hearts can be torn apart by the forces of history.
It's a tragic element within Franklin's otherwise remarkable life. But amidst these personal challenges, Franklin's commitment to his ideals never wavered. Even in his 80s, he remained active in public life, championing causes he believed in.
He became president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, continuing his fight for social justice and equality.
And his will, more than just a legal document, reflects his values and his vision for the future. He left generous bequests to Boston and Philadelphia, his two homes, to support young tradesmen and promote education. He even established a loan fund to help aspiring artisans start their own businesses.
It's like he was investing in the future, ensuring that the spirit of innovation and progress would continue to flourish long after he was gone.
His legacy is multifaceted. He was a scientist, an inventor, a writer, a diplomat, a statesman, a philanthropist, and so much more. But perhaps his most enduring contribution was his embodiment of the American spirit, that blend of ingenuity, pragmatism, self-reliance, and a commitment to making the world a better place.
He truly was a remarkable individual. From those humble beginnings, arriving in Philadelphia as a teenage runaway, to becoming one of the most influential figures in American history.
His story is a testament to the power of hard work, curiosity, and a willingness to embrace new ideas.
It's inspiring, really. It makes you think that if Franklin could achieve all that, starting from where he did, what's stopping any of us from pursuing our own dreams and making a difference?
That's the beauty of his story. It's a reminder that greatness isn't reserved for the elite or the privileged. It's within reach of anyone with the courage to think differently, to work hard, and to never stop learning.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Benjamin Franklin's incredible life, we leave you with this question. What aspect of Franklin's story resonated with you the most? And how might his example inspire you in your own pursuits? Thanks for joining us.